All right, everybody, Bob Chick along with David Bay and Sean Ray for MD. We are here at the New York Pro in New Jersey. Of course, a couple of add-ons this year. Sean, we'll get to those in just a minute. We just got off the stage a few minutes ago, concluding prejudging. Bikini, your favorite division up first.
Yeah, I liked all of them. As a matter of fact, I couldn't pick a loser here. They're all champions. One of the deeper lineups. This is a competition where everybody seems to come out for this New York Pro. It certainly hasn't lost any of its luster as the divisions start to broaden, including the classic physique. But the women's division is very competitive. I would hate to be a judge.
Well, David would love to be a judge, and I know he follows the bikini very closely. But listen, it was a stellar, outstanding lineup. When you got names like Brittany Taylor and Francesca Lauren and Stephanie Mahoy, who didn't even make the first call out, it's deep.
Yes, some new names, relatively speaking, in the bikini division. But your top two looks like it's going to come down to your Pittsburgh winner, Angelica Teixeira and Michelle, and Bianca Barry is also going to be in that top two. We also have a Catherine something I forget from Florida, Radulik, and Michelle Sivia also from Florida in that top four. But no real surprises there as far as what we've seen recently on the bikini scene. But like as you pointed out, a lot of good names not in that first call out. Just kind of speaks to what Sean said as far as depth in that particular lineup.
Well, David, another loaded up lineup, the Pro Figure, also earlier on in the prejudging came up. That was another one that was loaded up. Very deep lineups here in New York.
Yeah, Sydney Gillen, pretty much the hands-down favorite for the win in this division. Now, they had a 7-girl first call-out and last call-out. Sydney actually wasn't in the middle. It was Brittany Campbell in the middle. Now, Sydney a little bit softer maybe than we've seen her in the past. Brittany, on the flip side, was pretty lean. So I think it's going to come down to Brittany and Sid. Everybody, again, had picked Sid, but you might see Brittany walking away as a champ this year.
Well, Sydney truly a survivor, Sean, in every sense of the word, and you're perfect to go to this. You're a little familiar, obviously, with the reality shows and all that with your daughter's, her own show, of course, and the other one that she was on earlier before that. How much does that take out of her? I'm surprised she's even here, but she still looked great.
Listen, this is where her passion is. And when you're passionate about something, you can do a whole lot of things and turn it up to the next gear. Very few athletes are able to switch, so to speak. And she's one of them that has been able to do this, and she looked phenomenal.
Absolutely. Well, we'll wish her the best. But anytime if anybody wants to catch that, of course, Cindy Gillen was on Survivor and did pretty damn good. But also splitting time on a pro stage. So, moving on to our classic physique. Not a deep lineup in terms of numbers, but the quality was very good.
Yeah, a replay of Pittsburgh as far as your top two guys, Daram Charles and Arash Rabar. Daram was a little bit tighter, I think, here than he was in Pittsburgh. So I think it's going to be a little bit closer on the scorecards. I think Arash, kind of hands down took the win there, but it's going to be close here. Daram definitely improved from his last showing. We know he won a show just a week ago, so it's going to be tight. I think it's going to come down to finals for those two.
Sean, interesting dichotomy between those two guys. They're very close in terms of physique and build and size and all that, but Arash almost looks like he fits the mold a little bit better, I guess, in terms of like Daram looks like he had to make weight.
Right.
Arash looks like he just is that weight.
Yeah, he actually looks like number one to me, actually. And I think the lighting is favoring him. The lighting in Pittsburgh wasn't as good. And again, for those of you that don't know, the lighting can make or break you. And right here, it's favoring him. But it's, again, the judges are a different panel of judges. We could have a different outcome. Doesn't take anything away from Daram or Arash. So we're going to find out a little bit later on tonight.
All right, well, Supermen in board shorts took the stage earlier in the night. You like that one, David, huh? The men's physique was on the stage. Another very deep lineup, very good lineup. How'd you see that one, David?
Looks like a repeat of last year. Your 1 and 2 probably going to be George Brown and Chase Savoy. Yeah. So George won last year, came in as a defending champion. He was right in that first call out, dead center. So I think we'll probably see George as a winner. He won in Pittsburgh, so no surprises there.
Sean, women's physique started off the prejudging earlier this morning. One of the deeper lineups, again, 22. Again, every class just seemed to have depth to it this year, I think, which is the biggest difference I've seen between last year, especially with women's physique, which seems to be finding its way a little bit better these days, but for some very good physiques out there.
Yeah, there was a lot of depth, and I didn't catch the names. I was busy doing some other things, but I did catch 135 and 134, I believe was the black girl was 134. She had very athletic.
The black girl, that breaks it down really good, yeah.
Well, there's only one that's 134. You got to pay attention. Great genetics.
the two girls that were kind of the front runners were Asha Hadley and Shanique
Asha
Grant.
Hadley, yeah.
Shanique, a figure girl. This is the first show after placing not where she wanted to be in Pittsburgh. She moved up to women's physique. Structurally, she's light years ahead of everybody else. There's no two ways about that. Asha Hadley, good structure. We've seen her at a handful of pro shows, just never quite nailed the conditioning. She really brought it here this week. She's been working with Shelby Starnes, and
that's the thing. That this is where she's really on the cusp,
Right.
because she could walk in and win any women's bodybuilding competition, I think.
Talking about Asha?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm saying. There's a very thin line. Maybe she's not really big, but she's very defined. And that's where the judges are going to have to figure out which direction they want to go. And that was a question that was being posed to me. That's why I wasn't catching the names. I was looking at the numbers.
Well, David's right in that. I mean, I've seen Asha in a whole bunch of shows, and she's always been good, but she just looks like she just needed to dial it down every time. Like she needed another 2 weeks of dieting. But it looks like this time she actually did it, did the homework, and came out. Shanique Grant, now, we just talked about this on the last rep last week, where we both looked at her in Pittsburgh and said, she's got to go to women's physique. So apparently, I think it's a great move. Apparently, she took our advices, which, of course, were always the correct one.
Always right.
And, but it was great to see her on. How did you think that she fared in her first women's physique show as opposed to being on a figure stage?
She could probably win this thing. Again, this is the dichotomy that our judges are looking at, because once you let the genie out of the bottle, if you go with the girl that's a little bit bigger, a little bit more defined, you got to stay with that look for a level of consistency. Shanique is right there, and if they favor her, it's a little softer look. But again, this is where you're rewarding and maybe even over-rewarding genetics, which you just cannot train to develop. She's a genetic phenomenon.
Do you have her winning or Asha?
I'm going to wait for tonight because it is a two-part show, and it's not over till the fat lady sings, or unless David says something.
Well, the fat lady's warming up, Dave. Hey, listen, you got Asha or do you got Shanique in the winner's circle? Well, let me ask you this.
apples and oranges.
Here we go with the fruit comparisons again. Listen, stay off the fruit. Listen, bottom line is this. It may come down to tonight because it was very close. Two different physiques there. Could come down to tonight. The judges are always looking, especially at night. So be watching out for that one. All right, on to the big boys, almost the big boys. We're going to start with the shorter big boys, the 212. Sean, your class.
Yes, the Giant Killers.
Uncrowned 212 Olympia champ, Sean Ray. Guy Cisternino came in as probably the odds-on favorite for the class. Did he live up to the hype, and is he winning this one?
Well, he didn't blow anybody off the stage, and I think we might have kind of expected a little bit more of that. He was heavy last week. I told you he was kind of big, and so you've got the little guy, Sean Clarita, who's pushing him very hard. One that I was surprised with was Craig Richardson. I mean, Craig Richardson, as the prejudging went on, he actually faded a little bit, but this is a very good division for him. The guy that was going to be, they had in the final three, we know his name. What's his name? Victor, not Victor.
Can't remember nobody's name.
know,
The bald
freaking
black
names.
guy? Is that going to help us?
No, he's the Mexican guy, Puerto Rican. You know who I'm talking about.
That guy.
Well, I will tell you this. If Guy wins this show, it's going to come down to the finals, and he's being challenged by the littlest guy in the competition, in Sean Clarita.
I tell you, Sean Clarita, one of the new giant killer guys that come out. I mean, this guy's like another Dexter in terms of where he started and where he's coming. Yeah. But he keeps just putting on more and more muscle. But he keeps bringing the conditioning, very consistent with his conditioning.
He's thinking of Marco Rivera, the black guy, Puerto Rican guy. I think Guy's going to be your winner tonight. He's not as crisp as we've seen him in the past, but he's still the biggest guy up there. So I have him for the hands down favorite. That being said, Sean Clarita is at his all-time best. I mean, for Sean Clarita, he looks absolutely insane. I mean, he keeps getting better and better, and every time you see him, you're like, maybe he's maxed out. He is working with a small frame. Comes out again, even better.
And this is where I'm at, because look, you got to reward that. Okay, it may not be, it may not have the size of Guy as a champion, and Guy's got the better of the two hamstrings. But what Sean's bringing is, I just kept coming back to Sean. So my eye keeps coming back to this guy. I got to go with that because he's got the wow factor.
Well, when you say you're going to go with that, are you going with that for the win?
No,
or are you just going with they need to reward that?
I think they need to reward it, and the win is decided tonight. And again, these guys can dry out, and we can see some guys spill over. But Guy is in the driver's seat right now.
I mean, does he have enough that you would actually? I mean, just hypothetically, you're on the judging panel, you're seeing what we just saw.
After prejudging?
Yeah, and it's over after I mean, do you have Sean Clarita in the winner's circle, or do you have him in the top three?
I personally would give him the win because he has less to work with and he had more to improve on. And so I got to reward that. However, I wouldn't be shocked that it goes the other way, because this guy is a phenomenal, complete bodybuilder, whereas there are some weaknesses on Sean that Guy doesn't have. So when it comes to strength and weaknesses, I think Guy is leading in that category. But when it comes to the wow factor and the improvement factor, I got to give it up for Sean.
Yeah, you know what? I can't really disagree with that, David. I mean, the guy really brought it. He looks good. He is improved. He had the most crisp conditioning out of anybody on the stage. I don't think there's any question about that. Now it just becomes a matter of size, of course, and does he get dwarfed by the other guys? Even though he's given up a good amount of muscle and weight, I don't really think he gets dwarfed. I think he comes around very well when he poses.
Yeah, he's put together very well. He reminds me a lot of Marvin Ward, and Marvin to me is probably still a little bit ahead of Sean, but he by himself he looks so impressive. But we still have to look at the fact that even in a 212 division, he's given up about 50 or 60 pounds.
Yeah, right.
I mean, 50 and 60 pounds in the open division is huge, but in a 212 division to be giving up 50, 60, Sean's like,
Sean says, hey, you're talking to the wrong guy, man.
There's two contests going on here, because for third and fourth, Marco Rivera and Craig Richardson, that's a battle. That to me is a coin toss. I didn't see that comparison as much as I'd like to, so hopefully maybe tonight we will.
Good stuff. On to the big boys. This was a real interesting lineup, and a very good lineup. To me personally, a better lineup than we even saw at the Arnold. But a lot of the guys brought it. A lot of the guys look good. We saw an improved Ruli Winkler, put on a ton of size over this past offseason. Does he have the quality? And, some of the pre-contest favorites, Steve Kuklo, I think, delivered very well, very comparable. Victor Martinez, that we saw, a good Victor Martinez, again, right in the mix. So this was interesting to see kind of where the judges are going to go. And by the call-outs, it was interesting because they kept flip-flopping Steve kind of from the outside to the inside. So at some point you think he's in second place, but then at some point I think they got him in fourth place. I can't figure it out.
I think the smart thing is to move him around so that you get a good look, because I was sitting on this side checking out the guys, and I had one angle, and then I moved over here and I had a totally different angle. So to move him around is the only fair thing to do for the competitors, but this is Dexter's contest. Yeah. Dexter's called out once and stepped aside, and that was fair. I mean, if you're the champion, get out of the way. I mean, everybody wants to stand next to the champion, but this is Dexter's show. Now it's a battle for second. And initially you saw Roli walk out here lumbering with all that muscularity. Soon as he started to hit a pose, he started to sweat. The waterworks came on, which tells me he's holding way too much water. And then he started to fade. The stomach started to get a little bit distended. The thighs started to fill up with fluid. And the color started to just come all over his body. So he's just kind of came down. And coming on was Steve. The more Steve posed, the better he got. A little shallow in the chest, a little shallow in the back, but he's got beautiful lines and great shape. Arguably on the right track. He's a guy that could potentially wind up in, I think he's battling for third with Max Charles. Yeah. And then you got Victor, who started, he came out here not very impressive, but as he posed, he started to gain some momentum. I had him like in fifth place initially, but he may be moving up, in that top second or third spot.
This is an interesting call. Personally, I thought Kuklo looked like a second. Dexter wins. I mean, no question about it. Highest ranked guy here, a former Olympian. He looked like he's the winner, as soon as he comes out. And Dexter looked like Dexter. Nothing more, nothing less. A great thing if you're Dexter Jackson. Kuklo and Ruli was an interesting matchup. And again, they really kind of went back and forth with those guys, but they were almost never next to each other. It almost seemed like either one guy was next to Dexter or the other guy. I personally got Kuklo in a solid second.
Yeah, it's going to be close. The way they did that last call out, where you're looking at presumably second to seventh place or eighth place, and Victor kind of stayed in one of that middle spots. And like you said, it was Ruli and Steve, Ruli and Steve, Ruli and Steve. And so it's a hard call. It ended up with Ruli and Victor in the two middle spots. So, knowing what we know about how they kind of work the call-outs and stuff like that, and how, generally I'm going with Ruli for second, Victor with third. Sean hit it right on the head, though. Ruli was fading. Victor was getting better, and I'm literally in the exact same boat as Sean. When Victor came out, I'm not going to say I'm not impressed. Obviously, a fantastic bodybuilder, but I was like, he's going to have a hard time. Maybe at the bottom of that call out, he kept getting better. Ruli was sweating, got a little bit watery, so he definitely faded. Steve is just, he's got good lines, but he's really, really big, which is one of the things that we necessarily don't see a lot. We see guys, they're either big or they got good lines and they're a little bit smaller. Steve's a great combination of both. So he wasn't necessarily at his all-time sharpest, but if there's anybody who can be on stage and be just a little bit off and make up for it with structure and muscularity and lines, it's going to be Steve. So it's going to be an interesting top 3 or 4. You know,
Well,
Two of the guys that got totally lost in the shuffle is the defending champion in Juan Morel. I mean, Juan Morel came out as a defending champion, but it's a different lineup. And he never did come alive, so to speak, and he still did look like two different bodybuilders, one upper and the other in the lower. And John De La Rosa never really appeared.
yeah,
He was just,
now that was
he kind of just got lost in the shuffle. I thought, like a couple of the guys were saying, he's a little heavy in the butt. A little bit heavy, smooth in the thighs, but he's also a short bodybuilder. With all that mass, he still got lost amongst those guys. They were all 5'9" and up.
there were some big boys in that lineup, and Max Charles, I don't think got lost in the shuffle.
I don't think Max
No, I mean I think he continues to improve. I mean he's still got another guy who's got the tremendous upper body, and it's so big that it overshadows the legs, which he has improved on. But they still got to come up a little bit more. But he was in great shape. He looked very good. The new guy, Nathan. I thought he did very well, actually. It looks like he was kind of coming on at the end, Sean.
Well, out of all of them, he's got youth on his side from England, second last week to Rolly Winkler, but he's got structurally some of the best genetics. He's a little shallow in the back, especially in the lower department, and he's got to get a little bit more width. But this is a great place for him to learn. Max Charles, again, just a little bit. He needs to thin out the skin somehow and keep the hamstrings to come up a little bit. But he's in the hunt. Max is in the hunt. John De La Rosa did share with me that he's got some problems with his in-laws. Both of his in-laws are in the hospital in France while he gets ready to go on to South Africa and then on to Canada to compete over there. So he's got a lot on his mind. This is his wife who's competing today, getting ready for a show. But everyone has their issues. But he did say that some of that attributed to him not peaking here today. So I give him a little bit of credit for at least being here. But Nathan's got the most potential, and Juan Morel, he's going to have to try to hang on and see what happens in South Africa.
Dave, anybody else in that men's open lineup sticking out to you, or that you can recollect, having some promise, or?
It was an interesting pro debut for Dom Cardone. I know there was a lot of talk around that, and if there's anybody, not to take anything away from John, and like Sean said, we all have stuff that we go through, and we touched about it in the preview video. Dom's mom passed away not too long ago, and
Sorry to hear that, but
if there's anything, he was busting his butt, and he's the kind of kid with a work ethic who he's not ever going to say that affected his prep and that he worked through it, and we all know he was working very hard. I don't know, for being analytical, I don't know that we saw an improved version of him.
No, clearly he was better. He was better at the Nationals. I don't think there's any question. I'm not so sure. I don't know where his weight is, but I'd almost rather see him in the 212. I don't know if that's an option, but he didn't look like he can be a whole lot over 212, 215 land.
I can tell you there's a lot of shows on the calendar. This is probably not the one you want to jump into. No. But with all the shows that we've got from Baltimore to, all these other competitions, these guys have got to make the smart choices. You got a show in Canada. Some of these guys that are here are not going to make it. Some of these guys are going to go to South Africa. But if I were Dom, I'd pick a competition where, the playing field's a little bit more level. And he's got a lot of time for that.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen him actually debut at a Europa or a Tampa or something of... Which isn't bad. I mean, listen, it's nice if you can debut, but you're right, Sean. I mean, this is a tough house, to kind of, well, it's Dexter's house in this one, but that's kind of wrap things up here. Finals are tonight, Sean. Like you say, there's a lot on the line tonight. If anybody thinks that night show don't count, we've all been there to enough shows to tell you it absolutely counts, and when it's real close, they will absolutely look at tonight. Could be pivotal for Rolly Winkler because, like you say, a lot of water lost here this morning. He may come back tonight very sharp. And, along with those other guys.
To his credit, he's already qualified for the Mr. Olympia competition. I mean, he can come in here and get dead last. I mean, he could be upstairs eating pizza right now because he wasn't what he thought he was. Or he could be totally drying out in the gym, sweating and posing and really trying to fight. But he's got a couple of guys to go through. And he may be regrouping. He's going to have that rubber match out there at the Arnold. So just because they missed their peak here today doesn't mean it's the whole body of work is done. Again, we go on to Columbus, Ohio, or into South Africa, and then the guys wind up in Toronto. So a lot of work to do in a very short time.
A lot of shows coming up. Toronto Pro, obviously, and we're going to catch up with super promoter Ron Hachet, of course, from Canada. That's on the list. Next week, South Africa Arnold and the Puerto Rico Pro. Be down there myself with Tim Gardner and the crew. So lots of action still coming up, folks. We'll have a post-game report tonight. We'll do the wrap-up. We'll see if any of the predictions, even the one Sean didn't want to make, and how those pan out tonight. For David Bay and Sean Ray, this is Bob Chick. We're out.